it's Christy with the Chirp YouTube channel. Today I'm here to talk to you about the diagnostic criteria for an autism spectrum disorder. The reason is because people often ask me, do I have autism? Does my child have autism? And that's not something that a parent or I, as a speech pathologist, are supposed to be able to diagnose. The reason, therefore, that I am talking about this is because it's helpful to know if your child may need to be observed, may need to be assessed by someone who can diagnose these things, because a diagnosis often means extra support for your child. And extra support for your child is going to mean that you don't have to do all of the teaching yourself. You don't have to be the one who does everything for your child and with your child to help your child learn. There are people who know how to do it, who've done it lots of times before, and if you happen to get a diagnosis, then those people are available to help you and your child also. And that is a good thing. I know no one wants a diagnosis because we're afraid it will label our child, or we just don't want to think about it because it's too frightening to think about the future, to think about what if, all the what ifs, I guess. There are so many. We don't want to think about that. And so we just deny that our child has weaknesses in some of the areas where other kids don't, learns differently from how other kids learn. We just kind of ignore that fact. And that's not going to help anyone. It's not going to help your kid, and it's not going to help you. I printed out the diagnostic criteria from the Centers for Disease Control, and I have them right here with me to make sure that I get things right. The new diagnostic criteria, new-ish, require that a person have persistent deficits in 3 areas of social communication and interaction, and at least 2 of the 4 types of repetitive, restricted behavior that they have identified. So there are 2 different pieces of this diagnosis. The first part is the social communication and interaction part, and the second part is the restricted and repetitive behaviors part. I'm going to have videos that will come out later. They will sort of trickle out as the weeks go by on how we work on each of those areas where a child may have some weakness. The first type of social communication or interaction issue that kids with an autism spectrum disorder will have is deficits in social emotional reciprocity. So this is where a child doesn't understand social emotional cues. Social emotional means social and emotional. So a child might not understand what it means when someone is crying. A child might not understand that in some cases a louder voice means anger. Playing turn-taking games, asking for help, all of these social behaviors are going to be more difficult for a person with difficulty in this area. A person with an autism spectrum disorder will also have difficulties with nonverbal communication. This is the second part. Nonverbal communication, including appropriate eye gaze, body movements such as pointing, and understanding gestures from other people or body language from other people. The third part of this social communication and interacting section is developing and maintaining relationships. This can range from simply having difficulty understanding why someone is angry with you, all the way to having absolutely no interest in other people whatsoever. Those are the 3 things that are contained in the social communication and interaction part of this potential diagnosis. In order to get a diagnosis of autism, a person must display all 3 of those things, difficulty in all 3 of those areas, plus difficulty in at least 2 out of the following 4 areas. So this is the repetitive and restricted behaviors section of the diagnosis. The first bullet under this section is stereotyped behaviors. These are things that often other people who don't know that much about autism think that all people with autism do these things. So maybe hand flapping, maybe rocking, maybe lining up all of your toys in nice straight lines. Those kind of things are considered stereotypical behaviors or stereotypies. That is bullet point number 1. The second bullet point is insistence on sameness. This can be with echolalia, which I have addressed in more than one video in the past. This can be with extreme upsetness and agitation when routines are changed. And this can be with particular behaviors that play out over and over and over again exactly the same way. It also, of course, means extreme distress when anything changes, or even at the tiniest little shift in something, it can really throw a person off. The third bullet point in this area is restricted fixated interest in unusual things, typically. So it's not a 15-year-old boy who's fixated on girls. It's maybe a 15-year-old boy who's fixated on plumbing or trains or something like that. And what I need to say at this point, that let me stumble all over myself, but while I'm doing that, allow me to explain that part of the diagnostic criteria is that these deficits need to be present from a very young age, but you might not see their full extent until a child is older, because the demands on a child's communication and behavior are much more when the child is older than they were when the child was 2. A child who's 2 who has a really fixated interest, it may not be such a big deal. But if a child is 15 and is focused on plumbing and that's all he wants to ever talk about, I have known a kid like this, then that's going to be a bigger problem because of the social toll that takes for that particular child. The fourth bullet point under this diagnosis portion is hyposensitivity or hypersensitivity to sensory stimuli, meaning that the child may be undersensitive or oversensitive to things that brush up against her sensory system. Maybe she seeks out deep squeezes by crashing into you or running into the wall. Maybe he avoids everything that's even the tiniest bit sticky or slimy. One is an example of hyposensitivity, meaning that the child wants more of it, and the other is an example of hypersensitivity, where he's trying to avoid everything that's the littlest bit sticky or slimy. There are some caveats. Number 1, as I mentioned, the symptoms have to be visible throughout the child's whole timeline of life so far, but not necessarily at their absolute worst at the time of diagnosis, because they might still get a little bit worse depending on how much is expected of the child and how much the child's capacity is. Once you reach your capacity, your symptoms are going to seem a lot worse because you've maxed out what you can give. The second caveat is that these symptoms need to impact your life significantly. You can't just have symptoms, but you're functioning fine, you have good friendships, you have a healthy marriage, you have a job and hold down that without any difficulty, then you probably won't get a diagnosis. Another caveat is that your symptoms couldn't be better explained by some other diagnosis, such as a global developmental delay or an intellectual disability, which is a difficulty with IQ that doesn't necessarily affect the sensory system or some of those other areas we discussed. Once a diagnosis of an autism spectrum disorder is given, then the severity level is addressed. There are 3 different severity levels. Level 1 is support is required. Level 2 is where a person requires substantial support. And level 3 is where a person requires very substantial support. And these different levels are described in some detail, which I'm not going to go into because you're not going to diagnose your own child's support level or level of severity. That's going to be left up to the professionals. If you are concerned about your child's behavior, about your child's restricted interests or sensory difficulties or communication or social problems that you are potentially noticing, you need to find a developmental psychologist or some kind of an educational support person who can help you, get you pointed in the right direction to find the help that you need to potentially get a diagnosis or at least get help for your child. It's really important that we don't ignore these things. I've used before in my videos the example of being on the freeway headed somewhere, and your child developmentally has perhaps gotten off on a side road, and you can't just go back to the freeway in development because you don't want to miss all the skills between here and here. So your child actually needs to go back and learn those skills that she missed when she veered off the road developmentally a little bit before being able to make good progress. And so we don't want to wait until it's been 10 years and your child has been off the freeway for 10 years. We want to wait as little time as possible so that there are fewer skills we need to catch up on. Now that we have been through this video, now that we have discussed what the diagnostic criteria are, we will talk in future videos about how you can start helping your child in these different areas of need, even as you're going through the diagnosis process, even as you're getting your child's supports in place. You can still be teaching yourself, and you can still be teaching the people around you how to help your child through these videos. Don't forget, please subscribe. Please click like on the videos that are helpful to you so that I know what it is that is beneficial to you. I don't want to make videos that are not helpful. So give me a like, share the videos if you want to, and keep coming back for more. I hope you're healthy and well, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.